fold into the music community. Because amazingly enough, a lot of our musicians that are still doing sessions like playing down there. I mean, you can meet them there, fold into there, get into a sit-in to a jam or something, to sit in with them so somebody can hear you.
Network and get involved and let them hear you play. Eddie, if there's ever a thread that goes through Nashville that is this connecting line of musical integrity, your name comes up, the name Eddie Bayers comes up all the time. Every time I come to Nashville, Music City, the power of the music here, the songwriters, composers, musicians, there's always a connection to Eddie Bayers. It's always amazing to see. So thank you so much for joining us here. This is fantastic.
Well, it's my pleasure. Pleasure to be with you.
Tell me where music started in your life. When you were younger, how did it kind of enter your soul?
Ooh, it's been a long journey. There was a launching of it, not to my wanting, but I basically, through the death of my mother and sister, became homeless because I was the custody. I was already accomplished classically in piano. And of course, as we do in music, you know, there was a networking, so I knew people. And so I said, I'm not going to be a ward of the court because I was still so-called, you know, a minor. But I ran and wound up in Philadelphia. I got with a band because a friend of mine knew, and it was a show band. And so I got an organ, you know, B3 organ, and played with them. So I did that for probably about 8 months. And in Wildwood, New Jersey, they do seasonal, you know, like from Memorial to Labor Day.
Right.
7 days a week, 2 jam sessions and a shovel, you know. It was like you play, well, the band breaks up mid-summer. And there I am. I have nothing, you know, so I'm basically homeless. So luckily the woman at the hotel, I said, can I keep my B3 and Leslie here? She said, absolutely, and you can stay here. I said, I don't feel right doing that. So I just panhandled and lived under the beaches and stand on buildings.
How old are you at this time?
17.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. And from that, but it was amazing, the people that I met during that journey. Then finally, right before the season closes, because I said the season closes, I'm screwed.
Yeah.
I have nowhere to go. Luckily, I was this club owner would always let me play his piano, you know, and this guy walks in and he goes, hey, you work here? I said, no, the owner lets me play. He goes, you play great. He said, we're looking for a keyboard player. Of course, I'm like, so I went with them. And it was sweet because they were from New Jersey. I finished out the summer with them. Then the family of the guy, the Giacomos, took me into their home.
Oh my gosh.
You know, so it was just a blessing all around. And from that, it just starts, as you know, musically. Yeah. The more people you meet, then the band I was with goes to Las Vegas to become like a backup band for the Checkmates LTD at that time, which was the largest draw that Nancy Wilson had discovered. And we were working, at that time they had Nero's Nook and Caesar's Palace. So we were working there, and my facility was, because I could play drums, was that if their lead singer, Sonny Charles, went out, I was on the B3. If their drummer, Sweet Louie, went out, I got on the drums. That worked. Their musical director, a guy named Joe Romano, after that term, he leaves and moves to Oakland, California, and he says, he got in touch with me, he said, because of your events, you never got to fulfill your education. I said, that's true. He said, if you're a resident here at Peralta College System, you know, in Oakland or San Francisco, you can get your AA free. You can do your education.
How great.
I said, I'm on my way. And I went there, and he had a place. I stayed with him, and I went to Laney College there. Of course, I got the GED and all that kind of stuff like that. Through that, just knowing the industry, I got folded into a little jam group. Ironically, the jam group was Tom Fogerty, John's brother, Jerry Garcia, Billy Cole on drums, and Merle Saunders on the keyboard. And I played piano. From that, it started spreading out even more. You know, as you just meet people and you meet people, which is I'm an advocate, you know, get to know the music community.
The ultimate of networking.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So from that, I got folded into a group called the Edwin Hawkins Singers, Oh Happy Day, big gospel group. And so I toured with them. Then some of my contacts here in Nashville in 1973 contacted, we're going to start a studio. And I said, well, I'd like to probably get in the studio business, because I had been going into fantasy studios there, Saul Zantz's company, learned a little bit. But anyway, so I came here. They hadn't opened up the studio yet. So I needed money, so I auditioned for a job down at Carousel Club here, playing piano. So I'm sitting there waiting to do my audition. It's a little quartet up there. I'm waiting up, but that guy's really good. I don't know if I got this. That guy's really good. I got up and I played. This big burly guy comes over and he said, "You're my guy. You're gonna play with us." I said, "Oh man, I got a job." And he said, "I'm Larry Lovin."
The great session drummer in this town.
So for a year and a half, I was his keyboard player.
Wow, that's fantastic.
And it was interesting because he said, I said, I play drums too, but I'd really like to further that. So he said, I got my practice pad up there. I can show you all little rudiments and all this like that. And I said, Larry, I've been in an interpretive mode all my life. And I said, I just want to beat these things. He did show me some stuff. He really facilitated. In a year and a half, then I found a job playing drums with a top 40 band here. And from that point, got into the studio thing. My friend finally said, hey, the studio's going to open. I went there. Simultaneously, a guy who became my partner for 28 years, a guy named Paul Worley, who is one of our prominent producers and has been over the years.
Yeah. We
both started at the same time. We went through that, and after 8 years, Paul became so successful as a producer. He said, I really need, I need my own facility, because we were using the facility that we worked at. So him and I started a studio, rightly named the Money Pit. And we did all his production from Martina McBride and Big and Rich and Highway 101 and all that stuff. We had it for like 28 years. And I, during that term, bought the building. So when it came time where his production's minimalized, it didn't make sense to wait for a phone to ring.
Yeah.
We sold all the gear to John McBride, who you may know from Martina's husband.
Sure.
Blackbird Studios. And then I sold the building to Matt Rollins, the piano player. And after a year, he says, I'm going to go move to LA, but I've got a guy who would like to buy it. Anyway, that worked out. And then from that, during that whole time of being here since 74, I was getting in that studio business. We would bring in a lot of the mainstream players because we had our own little house band. So I got to know them and they got to know me, so they started booking me on sessions. I was doing demos, like at Tree Publishing and doing things like that. Then all of a sudden records came about to play on major records. So I got to do that. The one was 1979, 1980, 9 to 5.
Yeah.
And as you know, or anybody knows in our industry, when your name's out there, somehow they look like, oh, you. And I went, well, no, it's not me. There was other people that could have done this, but it's great that they want to give that to you.
Absolutely.
And then you just get frequent calls.
But your reputation was preceding you. I mean, you were doing consistently this work over and over at a high level.
Yes.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, and I got on so many maiden voyages, that's the thing that I appreciated, was after that and then being brought in to artists that they're just developing, like Randy Travis and Alan Jackson, the Judds, and watching those things start from, well, I really hope something will happen, and then all of a sudden.
Yeah, that's amazing. So what blows me away is that your piano training at an early age, did you take piano lessons? Where'd that come from?
That came from, my father was a military man. And at 7 years old, I found out that I could hear a melody and go over to the piano and play it. So he wanted to augment that. When we were stationed in North Africa, 5 years, there was a Russian professor there, Professor Konis, I remember his name, that he wanted to have him formally teach me. So he did. He would bring him once a week to the Quonset hut.
Yeah.
And he taught me. And so from that point on, I was just more in the classical vein. And I can remember being in Oakland, still new to everything, all of a sudden just seeing how, the different artistry that was out there, rather than just staying within a particular facet of mainstream. You know,
Yeah,
no country, rock, jazz. Of course, in San Francisco, you know, if you're not jazz,
Yeah.
you know,
You're out, yeah.
you know. But after meeting Fogerty and those people like that and hearing their music and stuff, which amazingly enough, decades later, I was doing John Fogerty's record in L.A. And we spent 42 days doing that album, you know. But he didn't know me then because at that time they had already broken up. So I was with Tom, and I never got to meet John. But then I got to meet him, and he was kind of giving me an insight about everything that happened, you know, which is a whole nother
Another story.
Yeah. So that's basically how it happened, and I stayed pretty much on keyboards even while I was here for that year and a half. But then after that, it became more prominent drums that I was asked to do.
And how did drums come into play? Had you been playing drums before? Where did the natural skill come in to be able to just play the instrument?
I think most of us as musicians can relate that you're a great drummer, but there has to be some other instrument, a guitar or piano, that you would.
I play some piano, yeah.
Well, that answers the question.
Yeah, interesting.
That's how it happened.
Yeah.
Because you do love that. I mean, I've known other drummers that are great guitar players, you know. I know several drummers that are great keyboard players.
Yeah.
And I know some great keyboard players that are drummers, you know, as far as how they're making their living.
Yeah.
And that was basically it. I guess it becomes an issue then as far as which I call business music. You're making a living.
Yeah, yeah.
And it depends on which one you're more frequented. And with me, it just became more drums and keyboards. But the beauty is the keyboards still stay in place. I still have mine. And now with virtual instruments,
Anything goes.
I can create
Yeah.
a record.
Anything goes, yeah.
Yeah, because the virtual instruments are so well done, they are the instrument.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, you can play your guitar on a piano. You can play an orchestra on a piano. You know, you can do a solo on a guitar solo.
So an entire movie score could be done on just one.
And they have been. If you look at, Hans Zimmer has a great video. A lot of times, I know some of my arrangers that I know here will come in with a quartet and do their scoring or whatever they want, and then they finish it out virtually.
Yeah. It really has changed the business the way it is. And you've seen the business change from the time that you were starting to record. First of all, what was it like? Let's just go back for a second to Larry Lovin. Larry Lovin was this fantastic, huge heart of a man that just had this wonderful, loving way to help people. He helped me out in my life. It's amazing. Tell me about your relationship with Larry Lovin.
Meeting him, I had no idea who he was. But getting to know him after that, he was a very loving man. I mean, he always, I love you, Eddie. In fact, there was a studio creative workshop that I used to go in when I did the Judge and Michael Johnson, and other artists there, that I went in and you would sign the wall, and I just signed my name, and the next time I went in, it said, "I love you, Eddie, London," at the end, So we had that great relationship. The thing about Larry was, as most people knew, he was also high in integrity and high in what was necessary and what was supposed to be done in a recording session.
Right.
He was a stickler on, we can have fun, but, we're here to serve.
Right.
And he became pretty much that guy, even though he might not have been leader on a session, but he made sure that those things went. Yeah. Sadly, when I learned of his episode in Denton, Texas, doing a clinic, and he became...
I was there at that event.
Oh, you were there.
That's a whole other story. I was there at that event. I was the first one on him to begin to give him CPR, yeah.
Subsequent to that, I went and I did my own clinic and tribute to Larry, just because I wanted to be in the room. And I talked to some of the students who were there. Yeah. And since you were there, because I said, what happened? They said, well, Larry was he would always joke around and do things. Yeah. And they said that he was going to get into this shuffle thing, and he got in the shuffle thing, and a stick flew out of his hands, and everybody was laughing because they thought, oh, that's a... Yeah. And he said, then the other hand went, then he was down.
Yeah.
And but anyway, as you know, the rest of the story, David Hungate called me and told me, he said, Larry has had something very bad happen. He's in a coma in Texas, and we don't know where this is going. Yeah. So I went in the studio, and this is what's going to get you to the story than my answer. We get into the studio, and I went and I was forecasting everything. I said, we don't know what's happened, but Larry's this. Billy Payne from Little Feat was playing piano on the session. I said, Billy, did you know Larry? He goes, I didn't really know him, but I remember a session that I did with him, and he climbed all over my ass for being on the phone too much. I said, well, that's Larry.
That's Larry.
He was such a sweetheart, and he was a sweetheart,
Yeah.
and an incredible musician, as you know, just
Absolutely.
an incredible player.
Yeah.
So through those years and all that time that happened, and when that event happened, you know, it was devastating to me, but of course then you recall all the beauty of having that time with Larry, you know, because when even people would talk about him and stuff, and to know, I said, I think I'm probably the only drummer that played keyboards for Larry.
You know, his name lives on through a scholarship that is aligned with the Percussive Arts Society that I helped organize, and his name lives on every year. Money is given away to young drummers in Larry's name, so his legacy still lives on.
He's still here.
Pretty powerful. So you're in the studios, you're doing all this work. The studio business and how it was to how it is now, it's changed dramatically. It's a full circle, right? So just talk a little about that, about how the studio was at that time.
Here in Nashville, there weren't really that many studios. There were houses. They were transformed into a studio. The microphone selections were not so knowledgeable. I can remember, you know, of course, analog tapes, but they were still, as far as the formative aspect, you know, you had a producer and an artist, and you go in and play a song. There were some great studios that are still here today that were there. I knew Jack Clement's studio, which is now Sound Emporium. There wasn't an Ocean Way, there wasn't a tracking room. There was Emerald Sound. There wasn't a 16th Avenue, so there wasn't really,
Interesting.
especially major rooms, there really wasn't. Then as years went on, the interesting thing as far as that applies to me or any other drummers, at first I would carry my own kit in, set everything up. Then as time went on, I was doing a record with Deborah Allen. Her husband, Ray Van Hoy, at that time, and an engineer named Chuck Ainley. We were all young. We happened to be at a studio called The Castle. And so Rafe came up with an idea. He said, you know your Simmons 5, you know, which is, you know, the infamous thing from
Electronic pads,
like that.
yeah.
Well, the other thing is, without the tone, it does just have like that, and you can lengthen that.
Yeah.
We had the idea to set up extra 57 microphones go into that thing to trigger those sounds. And when Tony Brown heard it, it blew his mind. He played it for Jimmy Bowen. Bowen, of course, says, what is this? Telling him how we did it. So from that, then all of a sudden Bowen wants to start doing these things on all his productions. So he calls out and he talks to Wendell out there, who's doing the Linn drums and all this kind of stuff like that. So Wendell sends him samples of kick drums and things like that. And Bowen then says, what I'm going to do is start triggering natural sounds. Well, all this started facilitating where all of a sudden I have to have a refrigerator, basically, with DDrums, a mixer, effects, an Akai sampler, and everything, and fold all those sounds,
Yeah.
you know. And that was the way of the world for several years.
Many years, yeah.
Then Bowen first heard about the DDrums, actual DDrums, which he said, I'm going to buy a set of those and then you'll just come in and start playing those, which I think any of us know, as far as the beauty of having drums that are padded and everything, and still they were antiquated samples.
Yeah.
And plus, if you had a tom fill that went do, 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 you know, however you panned it. And unfortunately, it didn't translate well to recording either.
Yeah.
And there are some records that I did with it that I won't claim. Just because it was so, and I don't mean to dog, because the DDrums, the way when I got the rack DDrums and folding just those samples in with other effects, I mean, they were immaculate.
Yeah.
They were fine. And I know there's been innovations, and we're talking about early on.
Absolutely, yeah.
So when that happened, finally got over that because they got sound replaced. I could play the acoustic drums, and when I left, that snare could turn into somebody else's snare. The kick was somebody else's kick, you know. So they started doing that for a while. Then all of a sudden, loops start using loops, which we did. You know, they were the Alexis machines and stuff like that, and almost all the beatbox sounding things. They weren't as vast as they are now, of course. So every record had to have a loop.
Yeah.
And doing it. So we put those on. Then after a while, radio delegates to the powers that be that they're tired of loops. No more records with loops. So that went away. And of course, as we know now, it's the whole world is a loop, even the drums.
Yeah, yeah.
In a lot of cases.
Yeah, yeah.
Then of course the machines from analog. Then the first digital that I worked on was a 3M digital machine. Then Mitsubishi built a 32-track digital machine, and then of course Sony and Studer both came out with 48s. The thing that was interesting as a studio owner, the 48-track that we bought was $198,000. That went on for years because you needed to have compatibility, that if you weren't doing major sessions, you needed a recorder, 48-track, so you could bring an overdub work from somebody else if they needed just to come in and do vocal, you could have your business. So we did that. Then when Pro Tools came out, all of a sudden, that becomes a boat anchor.
That's amazing.
Worth $4,000 comparatively to it. I mean, Pro Tools just changed the whole landscape of our recording. So through those years, the drums, luckily the acoustic drums still stand.
Right.
What they do with them afterward, it's not your call.
It's exactly right. They have complete control over it. So you really saw the change of this industry. I mean, really at a drastic learning curve.
Yeah.
That is absolutely amazing. Tell me about the business side of this now. I mean, because this is really an important thing for the students and people that hear these kinds of interviews, the business side. How'd you balance the business of all this here? From recording to producing to playing, all this, how'd you organize all that?
Your environment, of course. You know, I don't know if you're playing live, you're going to be subject to who you're playing live with. If it is just a group of musicians that are playing at particular venues, then obviously somebody's going to come in and go, okay, well, I'll pay you $100, or the owner of the club, anything like that. If it's an artist, then you're subject to whatever the management says this is what you're going to be making.
Right.
In the studio, it was always conformed to union scales, which obviously progressed as it came down to whether you're doing a demo scale, a master scale. Then they started fragmenting that into a limited pressing scale, which meant if the record sold over 10,000 units, they have to bump you up to master scale, right? Demo, if they cut a demo and it's moved up to being a master, the demo, you got that money, but the label or everything has to start over and pay you master as if it was new. There was a benefit we had called the Phonograph Manufacturers Trust Fund. So labels had a deal that any record they had that sold over 250,000 units got 2%, the label would have to donate to the Phonograph Manufacturers Trust Fund. So then your share dealt with how many master sessions you did in a year. So at that particular point in time, the checks were significant. And then of course, all of a sudden it wasn't manufactured records anymore.
Yeah.
Which even now, it's null and void, basically. Nothing's manufactured, it's all digital, retail.
Right.
But fiscally, the problem was as digital came in, then all of a sudden it minimalized the dialogue of residual. And that's in all facets. I mean, from writer to musicians. Of course, musicians here never did really share in that residual other than the Phonograph Manufacturers Trust Fund,
Right.
which now luckily has been taken over. Not that, but we have a thing called the SAG-AFTRA Fund that we now are getting great checks from streaming companies. Then with that, when programming and everything came in, it started minimalizing the frequency of the musician. Even, as you know, in orchestral world, when it got down to being able to do what they could do virtually, the groups are, smaller.
Much smaller, yeah.
And a lot of times not even frequented.
Yeah.
So with that, and watching now the fiscal template has now just been brought down so much from the time when I really was fortunate to come through.
Yeah.
I don't discourage with that because everybody lives within their means. So if they're doing a live gig, if they're doing studio work like that, or even writing, then obviously they're going to make it balance out so they can pay their bills.
Yeah.
I just can't say what that is because every individual has a different resource, as to, well, man, I got into X artist's thing and I've been there 17 years and I've been making this every year. So that's been a great job to have.
Yeah.
A lot of people have bought their homes and raised their children, being with artists for a long time. Or they just frequent different tours, and then somehow to balance that out with their studio, so, because I know Glenn Worf, one of our great bass players, he's been out with Knopfler for many years, Mark Knopfler, and 5 or 6 months he's out, but then he comes back in and works the studio.
There are ways to adapt to the industry.
Well, yeah, you have
That's
to.
what it comes down to.
There is.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because somebody had mentioned to me, if I come to town now, what would you tell me? Yeah. I said, you know who it was? Rich Redmond.
Yeah.
He's got a book he's got coming out.
Yes.
He said, I would love to get a quote from you to put in. And my quote was basically, fold into the music community. I don't know how that works. You could go down to Bluebirds where there's writers or musicians. You could go down to Broadway. I said, because amazingly enough, a lot of our musicians that are still doing sessions like playing down there. I mean, you can meet them there, fold into there, get into a sit-in, to a jam or something, to sit in with them so somebody can hear you.
Network and get involved and let them hear you play.
That has to be first. I said, secondly, make sure that you're aware that you might fiscally need to sustain by a regular job rather than what you're really wanting to see happen. But I said that's necessary because that can help you and sustain while you're still going at it.
Yeah.
If it's fortunate to come in, well, man, I'm here because somebody hired me. Okay, well, that's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
But if it's a situation where you have to sustain, then you need to find something to do that in. Being involved with Berkeley School, which I have been for years, and I have to tout that, 3 years ago, they gave me the first Master's Award.
How fantastic.
Because of my mentoring and things that I've done.
Congrats.
One of them, the kids, was a guy named Steve Sinatra, of all things. But when he got out, he called me, because that's what I do with a lot of the students that are going to come here. I said, here's my number. And that's the other thing I put in the quote. I said, a lot of us here are always willing to help. You just contact us.
Yeah.
So when Steve got here, he called, he said, Eddie, I'm here. I said, what are you doing? He said, I'm parking cars at the Lowe's Vanderbilt Hotel. I said, Steve, you're going to be just fine. Just keep pursuing. He got in little jazz trios. He did all these things. And finally, he became Little Big Town's drummer. And then from that became Hunter Hayes' musical director and still plays with Hunter as far as I know. Yeah. But I see these artists come through. And a lot of that was because of that networking issue, because a lot of us, and I try to tell them that before they even graduate. Yeah. Because I know there's always these little groups that segment themselves from the school and, well, they're I said, everybody should know everybody.
Yeah.
I said, in my life, if it hadn't been for people that I had met through my life that landed somewhere and said, hey, Eddie, we're starting a production company, and I'm in. You don't know where those people are going to land.
Right.
And you don't know where you're going to land to know that one talent that you've known through the educational system is somebody now who would be perfect for your production company. Right. So networking, that's first.
Interesting. But it's fantastic on how you have led your life, because you have gone from almost like performance, gig to gig, because of your ability and your talent. Not only your ability as a player, both on piano and drums, but your understanding of the recording part of it and your understanding of the business. So it seems like you have a really good business understanding, you have a great recording understanding, and you've got this great music understanding.
Right.
That's really special. That really is very special.
If you have some illusion that the music that you're playing is somehow above the music down here, I said that's important to understand that that's wrong. Otherwise, take your regular job and weekend warrior yourself, or go in your room and play what you want.
Yeah.
I said, but we're in a service industry.
Yeah.
I said, it's not our job to condescend. If we think, oh man, this up here is so much more complex, and listen to that and listen to that, then we go down here and we think, well, this basic, country song or whatever, however they want to condescend to it. I said, get that out of your mind and get genre out of your mind. The only reason genre should be important is to know what style that genre is, so that you listen to the successful, efforts of that genre,
Right.
and understand why it's successful. Whether it's a brush and a stick, whether it's fusion, whether it's rockin', whether it's progressive country, whether it's even a folded in loop to you playing to it.
Yeah.
That you have to make so that you are totally open, because maybe that great fusion band that you were just in breaks up and you got bills to pay. And then all of a sudden, somebody in this country band needs a country drummer. Are you going to go, no, I don't,
Yeah.
No, you're not going to do that.
Yeah.
But I said it's important to clear the mind. And that way, whatever comes in your path that you have to be required to do, you're not going to manufacture it. You're going to perform it. It's really important.
Well, that's powerful. Listen, over 300 gold and platinum songs that you've played on. This is an incredible legacy that you have, that you continue to do. I mean, you're still in the thick of it. You're still in the thick of it. Exactly right. It's an amazing experience. Artists that you've worked with, someone like Garth Brooks. These are people that you have had the chance to meet with and work with. These are fantastic people, just as humanitarians, aside from the fact of being great musicians and great, recording artists. Just tell me some stories about some of these people.
It's interesting because the one thing that I learned, I come in with a clean slate. First, I didn't come in, even if all of a sudden they said you're going to come in here and work on Vince Gill.
Yeah.
I don't look at it like I have any prior, thoughts. I come in, I'm going, okay, I'm your drummer. I am totally open to whatever you want.
Nice.
You can tell me, I certainly have my own ideas,
Yeah.
but I'll try them, and if you want me to try something, I'll do it, With Garth, I mean, all of them are individuals about how they did it. A lot of times I've mostly found that because of they already are aware of your talent and your feel, that you weren't really having to redo yourself mentally or performance-wise, because that's why you're there.
Yeah, you're not really selling yourself to a certain degree. Yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
And everyone would have a different methodology about how they would go at it, I think Knopfler was one that when you would go in with him, every song was his child. So you would go in, maybe in normalcy, you would do 2 songs in a session. He might do 1 song a day, depending on the time it took to try out each way of the way he wants to hear the song.
To give birth to that song, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And the thing I found interesting is that, but it all made sense. If it doesn't make sense, then all of a sudden you could start getting into labor, and just going, why? I mean, to me, the first way was the best, all that kind of stuff like that. Like Ronnie Millsap was interesting because he was such a quantized freak. Not because of click or anything, but just wanting everything precise.
Right.
And when we would do a take, then we would do another take, and do another take, and he was one. And after about 70 takes, then him and his producer say, hold on, this is after maybe 5 hours.
Yeah.
Hold on, we're gonna go back and listen to something. So they go back. All of a sudden I hear, I told you it was take 3. So.
Fantastic. It's amazing because you have already given great advice to as far as networking, as far as being prepared, going in there with an open mind. That's great advice for this next generation to understand. I got to ask you, in closing, what motivates you? Where does your drive come from?
Love. I love music, all music. I have passion. Every day I get up, I am absolutely humbled and grateful that I am going to sit on my instrument and play. Every song is an adventure. I take each one because it means that much to me, and as I know even means more to the creator of the song or the artist singing the song. But I've never lost that passion. I can understand how maybe sometimes the changes in the environment. I know that some drummers that I knew before, when it came in, all of a sudden, well, you're going to have to be very knowledgeable about being able to program loops and be able to be fast at it and know how to apply all that and get that to the engineer so he can fold that in. Whether you're playing live to it, but of course today they want it now, so I program it, put it on a flash drive, he takes it in and spreads it out over the track. Or now, of course, they have like the rolling machine that can all link up and do that, and then you can change it after the fact. But I guess my basic circumstance with that is they need to know that. But there were some who were reluctant, who just go, I don't want to learn that, I don't want to this, and I don't want that, and I want, there's nothing else to say.
Yeah, at that point.
Yeah, you're either in business or out of business.
Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
and I've watched that, unfortunately. After that, all of a sudden, they don't have work because they can't do what is expected. I knew engineers and the same thing. I don't want to learn Pro Tools. I don't want to learn this and this and this. And so the big producers, I said, well, I got to have a kid that knows it, you know, and I've seen that happen, you know. It's all the innovations that are going, and sometimes they're going fast. And the thing about me is that what I've learned with the love of it, and somebody go, well, you know, all that's programmed. I said, so? There's still a song there, and there's still an artist singing it, you know. I wish I'd have programmed that, you know. And the way that came about, I finally got into where I can do a whole record. Thank goodness for my keyboard knowledge. I said, but what got me into it, I was doing a special for the Dick Clark Productions about 5 years ago. And so what happened with those, artists would come in, but they would have to use our band in Las Vegas. That would be, because a lot of times their bands were already en route to the next concert. So anyway, Keith Urban, okay, this is Keith Urban's song. You'll hear an audible count off, there's a loop. Boom, and here's where the progression goes, where you start folding in the real drums. Okay, I got it. Lady Antebellum, okay, there's this loop, 3, 4, you know, I got that. Then all of a sudden, Florida Georgia Line, audible count off, 3, 4, and I went, everything is there. What am I supposed to do? And his crew said, act. But the intriguing thing was, as I listened to it, I don't recall the guy's name up in Canada that does it, but I mean, they're immaculate records. So well done. I said, there you go. My passion is saying, I want to know. I want to learn it. And that to me is a big key. When you hear something, don't let it make you either condescend to it or just go, I'm not going to do it. Learn it. I mean, to me, it's an automatic thing inside of me. I want to learn.
That's what makes you so special, and that's why your passion is still strong. That's why you have the open-mindedness to continue to learn, and that's why you're still on the cutting edge of what's happening. As I said earlier, you are the thread in this unbelievable city that when a name comes up, it's Eddie Bayers, because you are on the cutting edge of what's happening to this day. On behalf of the Sessions, we thank you so much, Eddie. You have done great.
Dom.
Thanks.
It's great to be with you.
Thanks.